because we're brought up in this country and we have this kind of limited perspective of what mental health is, how you treat it, it's medication. And even in physical health, there's like some things have a cure and some things don't, but we tend to treat the symptoms rather than the cause. Yeah. And I think that is a big issue. So for me, growing up, my mum's bipolar. And we always knew there was something that was not quite right. She would kind of, just have these episodes that were really, really scary, and we never really knew what they were. So that was quite difficult watching that and not really knowing, that's bipolar or is it schizophrenia? There was no label for it. But what was clear was it was taboo. What was clear was we must hide it. No one should know what's going on. It was all shush shush, and we never really knew what to do. We weren't equipped to deal with that situation. And for me, I don't mean like a sob story, get out the violin, but it was like, if that's your mum is like Gurbani, like talks about, that's your first guru. So for me, it was really difficult, never knowing what was going to happen. Like, is she in a good mood? Is she in a bad mood? But I never really realized that had an effect on me because it was just so normal for me growing up. And I think it was only later in life when I started to have my own kind of challenges, physical health challenges. And then as I kind of started to explore them, I realized there were these underlying roots of emotional and mental health challenges as well, that I kind of became aware of what is this thing called mental health. So I think that's where my journey started, was exploring my physical health, going from doctor to hospital, operations, and not really finding a cure, and realizing, I think the first thing was like, this system doesn't work. Yeah. Like, they just keep trying to give me medicine, giving me medication to treat the symptoms, but nobody can actually tell me what's wrong with me. Like, I had gallstones and they took the gallbladder out and it was like, okay, it's done with, but there was still pain. Yeah. And it was only when I met someone who's like a holistic practitioner, that she kind of helped to show me that actually there's this emotional component about your physical pain. That's when I really started to figure out, okay, who am I? Like, what is going on with me? I thought I was okay in life. I've got an amazing husband. I've got these 2 children. Even my in-laws are lovely, which is rare. But actually I still don't feel quite right. And I don't think I've ever felt quite right, but I just wasn't aware of that at the time. Yeah. Yeah. And then she was really encouraging me to go see a counselor. And I was really resisting it. And now if I look back and think about why was I resisting it, it was kind of the taboo, and it was kind of denial as well. Yeah. So it was like, I'm okay. Like, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing on the outside that was wrong with my life. I had a decent job, decent husband, decent family. But she really gently just kept encouraging me, gave me a card, and was like, maybe you should go talk. And she would try and get me to talk to her, but I really struggled to communicate. And like, you wouldn't think it now to see how much I talk. But I just, especially when it came to that kind of emotional stuff, I just couldn't get the words out. And she could always sense that there's something there, but I couldn't talk about it. And then it was only when I actually finally got the courage, my pain actually got a lot worse, that I was like, okay, I'm going to go and see this counselor. And she basically guided me through. I still didn't talk a lot in the sessions. She was doing a lot of talking, which for counseling, it's normally more, the other person talking. But she helped me to see kind of, okay, these are the factors, things that have happened in your life, experiences, and they've affected you somehow. And it really helped me to just get that out, to start talking about these things that I'd buried. Even things that we don't like to think about, like certain resentment, this anger that was, you wouldn't see it on the outside or when I talk to people, but actually there was a lot of anger inside of me, a lot of resentment, this feeling of just being lost. And even though I'd been coming into this journey of Sikhi for just a few years by then, there was still all of this stuff inside of me that I couldn't quite understand. So that's where my journey started. And by the end of just a few sessions, I had a bit more clarity. I wouldn't say, everything's cured and I was amazing. But it just gave me that clarity. And then from there, it was like, okay, what's next? And that's why I kind of got into coaching, was, okay, now we've got to figure out, because you can't just deal with the past and then be like, okay, what do I do now? There's got to be something next. So that's when my journey started with kind of mental health, is my mum's side of things. And even now, you know, sometimes she won't take her medication, and it's difficult to see that. But even, you know, me day to day, some days I'll be, you know, I would say there's a lot more good days than bad. But every once in a while, you know, I still get that day where I'm having a lot of negative thinking, or something might not go my way, and then I'll find myself really thinking about it.
So I was just thinking, there's so many kind of points that you've raised along that way, along the way in describing your journey. And one of the things that really struck me was when we started talking about mental health, you were actually talking about physical health, and how we really see them as two separate entities, don't we? We're like, oh, somebody's got a physical health problem, they need to go to a medical doctor, or they need to go to the hospital. And then you've got somebody who's got a mental health problem, which means that, you know, they need to go and see somebody who's specialist in mental well-being. Whereas for yourself, you know, it's almost as if they were completely merged. And they were inseparable. And so, you know, we started talking about mental health, but then you said actually the reason why you started to explore your internal world and your emotions and your psychology was when you started having physical health problems, and when the suffering was too much, the pain was too much, and there wasn't a obvious cure, and it wasn't settling, that you then thought, actually, I need to explore, or you were encouraged to explore the emotional side of things. So I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because out there, I think we do have this notion of mental and physical, whereas we know, like, if even from a Gurbani perspective, from a psychology perspective, that the mind, our body are not separate at all, that they both interact and interlink and affect each other in so many profound ways. Like in Gurbani, they always talk about mind and body together, Hana? Like one book that comes is Simro, Simar, Simar Sukh Pavo, Kal Kalesh Tan Mahe Mitavo. That doing the Simran helps to remove the kalesh, the conflict within the mind and the body. And so I find that mind and body comes together a lot within Gurbani. And, you know, you've done a lot of work around how the mind affects the body. And I'm just wondering whether we want to talk a little bit about that. You know, how do thoughts affect our physiology, even at that basic level?
So while you were talking, I was thinking of that bhakti about gussa man na hadaye dehi rog na lage palle sab kich paaye. So there's that direct correlation between when you're having gussa, when you have that anger in your mind, and then Guru's talking about dehi rog na lage. Like, you know, there's that direct correlation between your mind and your body. So the way that I've come to understand it more recently, so for me, it was that long journey, and I've learned a lot of things since. And what has really helped me is to understand that connection. So we have this cycle, right? So every time you have a thought, that creates a chemical reaction in your body that's called an emotion. So if we're feeling angry, I mean, we can test it out. Like, you know, how did you feel when you were last excited? When you were looking forward to something? It's a thought. You're looking forward to, you know, a birthday party, a holiday, but actually you're having a physical reaction with that. You might get butterflies in your stomach, and you might get the same thing if you're feeling scared about something, like, you know, you got a big presentation or doing this, you're going to have that chemical reaction. So we know that thoughts and emotions are interlinked in that way. We just take that for granted, right? If someone gets anxiety, especially children, you know, they'll tend to get a stomachache. So we know that. And what happens is when we have that thought, it creates that chemical reaction in our body, and that makes us feel a certain way. So we call those feelings. And now based on that thought and that feeling, then we do something. So if we overcome with anger because we feel like someone said something against us, it's led to that emotion, but now we might lash out at someone. So that becomes the cycle that we get stuck in. And what happens is over time, that becomes who we are. So
let's clarify. So you're saying that the thoughts that we think over and over again that create that chemical reaction, the feeling, which then creates a certain set of actions or way of being in the world. And then that then feeds back into thoughts again, doesn't it? So we've got this cycle that repeats itself over and over in different ways. And then what you're saying is then that becomes our personality,
that's
our way of living. Yeah. So we end up then, and what we know as well from the science and the neuroscience is those particular pathways of thoughts, feelings, and actions, they get etched within our brain. In terms of neural networks within our brain. So, and it's almost like there's this expectancy effect, isn't it? So you wake up in the morning, for example, and your brain already knows which neural networks, or it's already got those contained within it. So it's like, okay, now it's time to feel anger because that's how you feel every morning. And then you go and have your breakfast, and then you see, I don't know, your husband, and then now it's time to feel this because you see him every morning. And so it's almost as if and we know this about, we're going a bit deeper now, but thinking about the subconscious mind, which contains all of these individual programs that are linked to individual thoughts, feelings, and actions. And so most of the time we're just operating on the basis of a program, of a habit, and we're not choosing very much of how we respond and how we act. And, when we think about mental health, we see it as one thing. But in fact, from our experience and the work we've done with ourselves, our own journeys, and with clients, what we see is just that over time, these thoughts, feelings, actions, cycles have just been repeated, become etched within our bodies and minds. And we just live them day in, day out. And that's why, like, if you look back at your year or 2 years or 5 years, we sometimes look back and we think, well, we haven't changed at all. Like, we're doing the same things. And even if, so many of us have the intention to change and we want to be different and we have goals and we want to change habits, but it's so difficult in practice. And when we come to start to understand the science behind it, we come to realize that actually it's because, like in Gurbani says, kar kar karna, likh le jao. These actions repeated over and over again, they become us. We write them down and they become our destiny almost.
And it's amazing because it can just start with one thing. Like most people in their life will say, it's when this person passed away. It's when I got divorced. It's when, something in my life happened. There was an incident at work. So for me, like there was a certain incident in my life just before the physical pain that I can say that we had a family wedding. And like I'm quite an introverted person, and I found myself trying to be somebody who I wasn't in that moment, trying to people please and look the right way and be the right person. And I found all of this resentment internally coming up within me, but it became that vicious cycle that we're talking about. So the more I would think about who said what or what the expectation was, the more that resentment, that anger would build, the more I would, step away from people. And I didn't like who I was becoming, but I couldn't stop the cycle because I simply wasn't aware there was a cycle in the first place. And so that started to become my personality. I started to naturally just, be a little bit, take a step back from people and be a certain way. And often that's what starts for people. But we're not aware of, that was the incident that triggered it. And it's not that we have to be aware of that specific incident. But, I always say like awareness is such an amazing, beautiful thing. And, that's Maharaj's Kirpa. If you can step away from yourself and just be aware of, okay, who am I being right now? Why am I being this way? And what can I do about it? So we've talked about, our mind has these habits, and that's really helpful because we don't want to think about how to brush our teeth every morning. But it can also be detrimental to us because if our habit is to wake up in the morning, check your phone, and then have loads of judgments about what people are doing or saying on Instagram or WhatsApp. So if you think about that, and I used to do this, I don't go on like Instagram anymore, but I'd look at somebody, say a coach, and I'd be like, wow, isn't that amazing what and I would compare myself. So I'd start my morning off feeling really negative rather than being like, wow, look what she's doing, which is what I do now. It was like, oh, I can't do that. I want to be able to do that. So I've got this negative start to my morning. Then I'll wake the kids up, and if they're messing about, that's going to add to it. So the balance, like you can see it gets out of balance really quickly. If someone cuts you off in traffic, that's going to add to it.
And then the next morning you wake up and you start to feel negative, and it's come up from nowhere, but it's because the brain is ready to be feeling the feelings that you felt yesterday and the day before and the day before that.
Sure. So my question is, how do we then interrupt that?
So this is this is tough. This is the work. And I think that just having an awareness of the fact that these habits are very challenging to interrupt. And it's not through any fault of us trying to interrupt these cycles. It's because the process is very complex. And it's, I guess the first step is, like you've said, awareness, waking up from the sleep. Gurbani talks about, that we're walking around in a sleep almost, Hannah. And that's the way it is. It feels like for many of us, in terms of like, you'll go throughout your day and you're so busy doing all the things that need to be done and reacting in the same ways that you reacted yesterday, and having all of the thoughts. But 95% of our thoughts are the same as the thoughts we thought the day before, and the day before that, and the day before that. And so we're so kind of asleep, unconscious in this program, this kind of pre almost determined way of being based on our own actions, determined by our actions, that it's very difficult to kind of step back and be like, okay, let me just wake up and just see what's happening here. So like you said, awareness, the first step is looking and looking at your life morning till night, just taking a day and saying, okay, which parts of this day feel like they fit with who I really want to be, and which parts don't actually fit with me, don't fit with the ideal that I have for myself. I think that's the start.
Talks about bande khoj dil mere roj na fir pareshani mahe. So, we have to, and then obviously with Gurbani, there's so many different ways of interpreting what Maharaj is saying. But when I first came across that bhakti, like that was it for me. It was like, can I reflect? Can I do search within my heart and figure out, was I the best person that I wanted to be today? What went well? What didn't work? And even though that feels like a mental exercise, I think it's a really important first step, because like you said, we all have this aspiration of who we want to be. Like whether it's we want to lose weight, we want to do more exercise, we want to eat better. We all start like, January, everybody starts their New Year's resolution, and then we fail and then we feel bad about it. But actually to know that there's 95% these programs, these conditioning is embedded within us. And that's why it's so difficult to just use our willpower to change something. So the first step, what I hear you saying, is to just be aware of that. What is it that I'm doing? Who is it that I want to be? And start from there. So where would you say we would go from there?
So I guess it would be identifying those parts that don't fit with, I think maybe having a clear vision of who is it that we want to be. Like what kind of person, what kind of feelings do we want to feel? Not like who do we want to be in terms of I want to be this perfect person, or I want to be, but more focusing on how do you actually want to feel? Because many of us go through our days feeling pretty awful, or we've got this like low level anxiety or low level resentment or low level negativity that we're just walking around with. And so I would say, after that, it's about saying, okay, how do I want to feel? Do I want to feel elevated? Do I want to feel positive? Do I want to feel good within my body? Do I want to feel spiritual? Do I want to feel connected to Vaheguru? Do I want to feel the qualities described in Gurbani, compassion? Do I want to feel more prem? How, if I'm thinking from a spiritual marg perspective, in terms of wanting to get further in my spiritual marg, what are the qualities that allow me, enable me to get there? Sat, Santokh, Daya, Dharam, all Satoguni qualities. What would it be like if I felt more of those things? And so having a clear vision and a sense, and that's, I guess, when we read Gurbani and we start to hear what these qualities are, and we read, the shabads and the gurus speaking, and we feel different within our bodies, right? We feel the love oozing from the words. We feel those qualities. And that gives us, without us even realizing, a sense of how we would want to feel, who we want to be, how we want to move through our life. And what the science suggests is, even when you start thinking about that or exploring that new way of being, you're starting to rewire your brain just by thinking, actually, I want to feel that way. You're starting to create new networks within your brain. So Gurbani is very, very powerful. And Gurbani reading as a koji, as opposed to just reciting. There's so much kirpa for whoever's able to even just recite Gurbani. And then, you know, so much more kirpa for those who are able to, you know, do Koj and then to actually follow and act.
Yeah. So there's kind of two things that I want to pick up on.
Yeah.
One is this phrase, actually, that the mind doesn't know the difference between what's happening right now and a memory that you're replaying in your mind. So, you know, for example, obviously, I work with clients, as do you. And, you know, often we'll get that person who that one thing that happened in their life, and they'll replay the same memory day in, day out for 5 years, for 25 years even, you know, even 50 years. Is that one time, you know, my son got divorced and my norm was like this. They're replaying that memory over and over again. And like we said, so the thought is there. They're releasing that same chemical, but the mind doesn't know the difference. Did that happen 25 years ago? Is it happening now? So you're getting stuck in that cycle. So that's really important. But we can turn that on its head. So, you know, if you've had an amazing memory in your life, even if that memory is like just something really small, but you replay that memory, you're going to have that same chemical reaction for a positive emotion and a positive feeling. And that, like you were saying, you know, that starts to become who you are. But I also wanted to pick up on the point of, you know, Gurbani, like Guru's given us Rag, Guru's given us Kirtan, Guru's given us Sangat, and just all these things that take us into this higher vibration, this to help us feel in a kind of an elevated state. And I think that's really important as a kind of, I found that, you know, when I was going through my darkest times, at the same time I was coming into Sukhi. But when I would go to the camp or I would go to the Gurdwara for a Kirtan program, like I could kind of get a respite from that. But when I would come home and then I'd get up the next morning, again, you know, I had this in my mind that I want to be a different person. I used to really love seeing Bibiyan with Geskya, and I'd be looking at them and putting them up on a pedestal. I still do a little bit. But I would be like, that's, you know, I would see somebody and I'd be like, that's the kind of person I want to be. I want to act like her. I want to be like her. But there was still a disconnect for me. So as much effort I would do into trying to be that person, you know, if the kids didn't listen to me just like that, I'd go into anger or at my husband. So we've kind of got a little bit of a path here, is like, figure out who you are, figure out what you want to change, who you want to be. Then we start to use these tools that Guru's given us. What happens next?
You're asking me all the hard
ones.
I think in our personal experience, it's a complex answer in some ways and a very simple one. Because if you asked me what is the one tool that you feel has kind of contributed to your own personal journey or transformation, I would say it's doing Simran, it's the meditation. And there's so many things around that and leading up to that, and things that support that, like the Sangat and the Gurbani and all of that. But ultimately, and I've shared my experience before, but for example, the thing that I really struggled with was that I looked like an Amritdhari Sikh for most of my life. But, you know, behind closed doors in my own home, you know, especially when I got married particularly, I really struggled with anger, resentment, lots of negative feelings. And they used to, you know, come up within my body, and they've arguments and conflict. And it was just a really, it's just, you know, it's complete disconnect from what I envisaged my life would be as a Sikh, and what I was reading in Gurbani and what I was understanding from role models within Sikhi. And so I was like, but I'm doing the part, I'm doing the Kirtan, I'm looking the part. So what, so again, I kind of had a sense of who I wanted to be, you know, the kind of person I wanted to be, but there was such a big disconnect. You know, what was it that was getting in the way of me actually being able to embody those qualities of love and compassion consistently? You know, like you're saying, when we go into Sangat, you do feel elevated, but then you go back to your day-to-day and that old program takes over without you even recognizing and realizing. So for me, things really, really started to transform when I started to take kind of a daily meditation practice. It took me quite a long time to bring myself around to that, because Simran I found very, very difficult at the beginning. So I would sit and try, and I remember reading my diaries from when I was like 19, 20, and I'd be like, to do 5 minutes of Simran, and like every day it would have like a cross because I hadn't done it. Just even getting myself to sit down for 5 minutes was, I found very difficult. I would sit there and I'd be like, oh, I'm having thoughts. This is boring. This is not doing anything. It says in Gurbani that Simran is the answer to everything. And at the whole of Sukhmani Sahib's about Simran and Astpadi al Prabh ke Simran, Garabna Base Prabh ke Simran Dukh Jamna Se Prabh ke. Like, it's like, but I'm doing it and it's not working and it's hard. And just as time went on, I started to have more experience of doing Simran in Sangat. And to be honest, the major impetus for me was just more suffering. So more conflict, more dissatisfaction with who I was and the life I was living. And I just thought something's got to change. And you get to a point in your journey where you become desperate. Like you were saying that there came a point where the suffering was so great that you just had to do something different. You had to kind of seek out answers. And, you know, I guess we see suffering as a negative thing, but in Gurbani it says, Dukh daru sukh rog paya. And I think that was the first time I truly understood that, which is that when you're in dukh, then you kind of, the ego, you surrender the ego. You kind of recognize that you don't know all the answers. And you kind of just have to abandon kind of that ego and just surrender and say Vaheguru or whoever. At that point, I didn't even know if I really believed in Vaheguru. I didn't really, even though I was Amritari, you know, I didn't know what this was. But there comes a point where there's so much suffering, you're calling out to something in the universe to just hear your call or to give you some direction. And that's the point at where I was like, I can't do this anymore. And every time the suffering would be greater, the call would be more heartfelt, it would be more sincere, it would be more genuine. And as I was doing that, you know, now, you know, I believe that Vaheguru, helped, heard, listened. And as we'll talk more about this maybe in other sessions, but Vaheguru and energy and what that, you know, all of that. But, you know, so at that point, then I started to have more opportunities to do Simran in Sangat. And I started to it took a long time. It took time for me to develop the ability to sit and do Simran for more than 2 minutes, for more than 5 minutes, for more than 10 minutes. But I had this one profound experience where I did Simran for quite a long time. I was kind of forced to. I went to the Simran camp and I started to feel a sense of lightness and peace within my body that I'd never felt before. And you know, it completely changed my life. Just that one experience of being able to feel a different way within my body. Whereas all that time I'd felt resentment, anxiety, you know, stress, constant comparison, low self-esteem, all of that, insecurity. And then being able to just sit within Sangat, do Simran, and then feel differently was so incredible, because it was the first time I realized that I had everything within me that I needed to be the person I wanted to be, that I didn't have to go outside myself and look for solutions outside. You know, I didn't have to wait for, I don't know, the marriage to get better or to get a bigger house or to have a better career or to become a mother because I thought that would solve my problems. Like it was like, oh, wait, so it's not about the external. It's about being able to tap into something that's in there. You know, Kar sukh vasya, bahar sukh paya, that it's the other way around, that it's not about finding peace outside and then it coming inside. It's about experiencing it from within. And so that's a really long answer to your question. But what we know from the science now, Benji, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on that, is that meditation has a profound effect on our psychology, our physiology, and it allows us to override those programs that we talked about before. And it's the only thing known currently within science that allows us to reprogram that subconscious mind. Nothing else seems to work. You can read all the books you want. You can go to all the courses you want. You can have therapy all you want, which all of those things are really useful in their own right. But if you're looking for true transformation, if you're looking for manas te dev te paye, Tyaya Naam Hare, then that's where the Simran meditation comes in. So it'd be really good to hear from you about kind of the science, what we know about that.
So I'm with you on that. And so for me, it was like, even though I felt a transformation before that, you know, with the meditation, with the Simran practice, I started to tap into what you're talking about as well, just feeling completely different. And up until then, it had always been actually when something changes, I will change. I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when I get the job or when I get married. And I totally connect to that. So what really blew my mind is, I'm a coach. So I watch all these self-development videos. I do all the courses and, and like you said, things do help. So, counseling did help me at that time, and journaling really helps me. There's lots of things, just talking to people really helps me. Doing reading Gurbani, doing Khoja Gurbani, that all really helps me. However, when I found, like you, when I started to do the Simran practice at a kind of a deeper level, that's where I felt a quicker and deeper transformation. I'm not there yet. But what really helped me to actually get engaged with that practice was learning the science. So it was things like when you change your brainwave. So what reprograms the subconscious mind? So remember, the subconscious mind is that habit mind where we do the same thing over and over again. And as much as we want to change, we find it difficult to, but in my case, stop eating the sugar. But what we know that science is catching up with Gurbani, right? So what we know through science now is there's kind of two ways that you can do that. One is through repetition, but that's hard work. So doing the same thing over and over and over again. Again, it takes
a new habit.
New habit. Yeah. But that takes a lot of willpower. And again, you're going to have those programs fighting against you. So you can use repetition, but use it as step 2 rather than step 1.
Yeah.
Step 1 is by changing your brainwaves. So when children are very little, up to the age of 5, they're like a sponge. And they're in this kind of hypnotic state. So they absorb everything that's happening around them. That's how they learn how to walk. That's how they learn how to talk. And after that age, it becomes less and less over time. But the difference between a child of that age and us as adults is where is their brainwaves. So they're absorbing things because their brain is vibrating at a certain level. Whereas when we're just talking, we're going about our day, we're not really absorbing. So how do you change that? And how you change that is through meditation. So when we're doing Simran, when we're doing any kind of deep meditation, what we're doing is we're beginning to change our brainwaves. So for example, when we're doing Simran, we're really focusing on the mantra, whether it's Mool Mantra, whether it's Vaheguru Simran. The more we focus on it, the more we bring our mind in full attention of that, it starts to put us in this kind of, I don't want to say hypnotic state, but it starts to change our brainwaves till we get into that state that we're talking about. And that, that's not even the deepest level. Like even on a surface level, that's where we can start to create change. If we experience peace and bliss at that level, that is a practice. And practice means you practice it in your morning routine or your Simran routine, but then that feeds into the rest of your day. And that's what is amazing to me is I can sit there and do Simran, but actually I will carry that feeling with me for most of the day. It might not be the whole day. I might need to top up, but I'll carry it for quite a lot of my day. So that's amazing. But then even beyond that, what I feel like my understanding of what Maharaj is talking about, there's even the levels that are beyond that, which is, getting Gobind Milanki, E Teri Bariya. So taking on the gun of Vaheguru and becoming like Vaheguru and eventually getting to that point where you can actually have darshan of Vaheguru, whatever that means, I'm not even sure, I'm not there yet. But just knowing that there's something that's possible beyond that, like we have all this amazing itihas, we have all these sakya that talk about Sajjan Thug, that talk about Ganika, the prostitute, these people who were like, man-eaters and murderers and prostitutes. And then we talk about, the guru changed them, but we never really understand how did that happen. Or we think, it was just, they recited Gurbani, they did some magic and they changed and transformed. But actually Maharaj wasn't here to say, I'm up here and you can't do that. Maharaj was here to say, you are all capable, you all have the potential. And for me, that's been my experience of Simran, that, I can change who I think I am. If I know sometimes you say, you always thought you were an angry person and that's never going to change. But now you can say, that's changed. And for me, I've always felt like I've never felt worthy. Like I always felt like I've always had lower self-esteem. And I feel like, that's really genuinely, that's changing. And that's what was happening I as far as I understand is, you know, Guru talks about the Paras, you know, the philosopher's stone. My kids love Harry Potter, so it's like something that changes something. It changes iron into gold.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, it's genuine, like what Maharaj is saying, obviously, that Simran is that Paras, like doing that meditation practice. It can really, truly change you from the inside.
Yeah.
So if I look back at Ittihas and I think, okay, there's nobody who's not worthy of having that potential to change. It does still require effort, right? So we still have to do it. I was having a conversation earlier and it was about, I was waiting, like when I came into Sikhi, it was amazing, it was transformative, but then I was waiting for just Kirpa. So I was like, okay, I'm doing my Nityanim, I'm trying to learn Path, I'm trying to do this thing, I'm coming into Sangat, but now I'm just waiting for the Kirpa to happen, for Guru to truly change me, or for me to just, you know, meet Vaheguru. But now I feel like I have a method, like where I feel like I'm making, I don't know about saying I'm making progress, but I just feel like day by day that I'm getting a little step closer.
Yeah.
So the real challenge for me was, like you said, sitting and just trying to control that mind, because the mind will want to go everywhere but concentrate on Simran. One thing that I learned yesterday, I was watching a video and they were talking about meditation and the scientific benefits of it. But they were saying, even if you don't feel like anything has changed and you were like, oh, am I doing this right? Why can't I focus? It still does have an effect on your body.
Yeah.
So the study that I was listening to is by somebody called Dr. Joe Dispenza, but they were actually studying meditators, long-term meditators, novices, and people who had never meditated. And they were exposing their blood samples to the COVID virus. And it was just mind-blowing. What they found was the people who had never meditated, the virus was straight in there. It would go straight into the cell and it would do its thing. Those who had meditated a little bit, there was a little bit of resistance on that cell to the virus. But those long-term meditators, the ones who had meditated for 6 months or more, the virus it would simply stay on the outside. It just couldn't get into the cell. So those are kind of the things that we're talking about. Like Maharaj said, Sarabroka Okhadanam. And we don't take it literally. It's like, okay, maybe, you know, maybe that's true on some level, but I don't quite get it.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, you know, physically, I feel healed now. Emotionally, I feel it doesn't mean I don't have a bad day or I don't have a cold or a stomachache once in a while, but I don't have that rog, you know, that chronic, you know, dirag rog. Guru talks about that chronic disease. And I feel like it was because I was just overcome with that homme, which, you know, we talk about ego, but it was about, it's just me and my life, and why has somebody, you know, done this to me? And then I kind of drowned in those emotions of, you know, that what we call the panchchor. And what's flipped for me now is, without having to make the effort to be a good person, is when I can sit and meditate, I feel like I'm getting direct access. And so that's kind of like Guru talks about Nam, Dan, Ishnan. I feel like I'm getting that Ishnan then. But it was difficult to begin with, like to sit. And what's really helped me again is doing it in Sangat, having a Sangat to sit and do the Simran with, but also like just having that discussion, having that vichar about, okay, what has been your experience? Sometimes it's really difficult. How do we motivate each other? Because that's a really big part of Sikhi, is to have that Sadh Sangat. And for me, all Sadh Sangat means is people who have that same intention to get closer to Guru, and they're talking about Guru, and they're doing their efforts to do that. And that kind of motivates you to keep going.
Yeah, it's incredible, because we started off asking the question, is mental health curable? I think we've just blown that question out the water, in that, you know, everything is curable in terms of Gurbani and Sikhi. There are no limits to what we are capable of and what is possible, because ultimately, है ना, Gurbani se man tu jot swarup hai, apna mool pashan, ke we are not our bodies, not our identities, not our roles, but we ultimately jot swarup, we are the embodiment of divine light, of Vaheguru. And Vaheguru is unlimited. Vaheguru is the one who created this whole creation, who sustains everything. And so if we're tapping into that, if we're able to start to peel off those layers of who we are not, which are just vichar, identity, thoughts, through doing the Simran, we come to realize who we truly are. And then we are unlimited too. We can tap into all of that. And I think that's just so empowering. And for me personally, it has been so empowering and so just inspirational to know that it doesn't matter what struggle you're having or how you feel within your body and your mind. There are tools. There is a way out. There is a way to move through that and recognize your true potential, who you truly are. So it's wonderful hearing your journey as well.
And it is that partnership between the Simran and the Gurbani as well. Like the Gurbani is constantly, it's like having, I don't want to reduce Maharaj to a coach, but it's like having your own coach. Like Guru's constantly giving you the truth over and over and over again and reminding you what to do. And then you do it. It's like, I always say it's like, you know, going to IKEA and you buy, you know, some shelves and the instructions are in Swedish and you just read them over and over again. You'll get so far and then you understand them. But until you don't start to put the bookshelf together and then you actually put the books on it, you kind of miss the point. So for me, you know, Gurbani is like so amazing and it's healing at its vibration as well. But at the same time is, you know, if Maharaj is saying Prabh ke Simran, how do we implement that? So for me, kind of, I won't say the last question, but the question I have is if you're that person like I was, who feels like they're doing everything right, and maybe they're even like, I sit there and I do Simran, but I just can't settle my mind, or, you know, I don't feel like it's working. What would your advice to that person be?
I would say come to our course. We'll tell you more about that. But I think that it's really a blessed position to be in, to be even attempting to do Simran. There's a lot of kirpa in that, you know, Vaheguru's got their glance of grace on you, that you've kind of come across this tool. So there's a lot of blessings in that. And I would say going into Sangat and doing Simran within Sangat is a really powerful thing. And listening to any katha or discourse that is inspiring, that does focus on Simran and the benefits. And if the science helps, go on YouTube and just explore meditation and science. And because ultimately, when we feel inspired, we're more able to do something, aren't we? That's even if it feels difficult. So I think it's about the Sangat, the inspiration. And, you know, unfortunately, suffering is also a very good motivator. So, you know, ultimately, you know, I believe that we'll all get there, whether it's not this lifetime. Ultimately, our destination is the same, which is with Akal Purkh, with our true mother and father. But it's just about whether in this life we can access the Sangat, read the Gurbani, do whatever inspires you. Would you add anything further to that, do you think, to encourage with meditation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the key things for me is that awareness. So when I say awareness, what I mean is, if you give it a try, if you give it a go and really notice, you know, how do I feel today? What is the difference? And when you're not doing, what the difference, because we forget really quickly. My brain is like a goldfish. So like I might do Simran for like a month in the past and then I would stop doing it, but I would forget how amazing it was until I'd start doing it again. So really notice the people around you. If there's someone who's already doing it, like, do you notice the change in them? And notice how you feel when you're doing it. And every step you take, like whether it's Simran, whether it's Gurbani, whatever it is that you're doing, it's really important that we assess, actually, is it making a difference to me? Because otherwise we're just doing it because someone told us to do it. And what we want to do is feel that true change. So I'm going to ask you the question again, Benji. Is mental illness curable?
Yeah, I don't even know if that's a relevant question anymore. But absolutely, with Guru's Kirpa and with all of the tools that we've been given in Gurbani and Sikhi, absolutely. You know, I'm convinced when any time a client comes up in front of me, and I meet them for the first time, and they tell me sometimes their stories are really very difficult and traumatic, and the situation is very difficult. But I always feel very, very hopeful now, since my own transformation. That anything is possible. And so I would say, yes, absolutely, it is.
So for me, I would say, again, absolutely it is. But I would say it's not necessarily going to be an easy road. And if you have those days where you're struggling, that's okay. Like those days are going to come. They come for me too. They come for all of us. So it's not about, I should just do my part in Simran and I'll be cured. It's not an overnight thing like that. But just having something that has worked for somebody, or has worked for many people over time. If we just hold on to that ask, that hope, and we do our ardas to Maharaj Ji as well, that I think, we just take it one step at a time, and not letting our thoughts get in the way. What happens is when you have a bad day, sometimes you'll be like, okay, but there's no hope for me, or I'm not good enough, or what am I doing wrong? And just having that bharosa in Maharaj that actually I'm going to trust you. You want me to accept hukam, I'm going to accept hukam, but at the same time I'm trusting that you're gonna show me the way, and the signs come from a conversation. The sign comes from the people you meet, the videos you watch, the books you read. So it won't be necessarily the easiest thing, but there's no alternative either. And at least take hope in knowing that there's people out there who have got to the other side of it, or are working to get to the other side of it.
And I wonder whether we could end with Benji, if you could guide us through some Simran just for a few minutes. So we can all experience the benefits together.
Brilliant. Okay. So I will encourage everybody to sit with a straight back. So the reason I say a straight back is we just want to let our body know that we're going to pay attention. We're going to use our focus at the arm, and you can relax the rest of your body. And just find some comfort in having your eyes closed and just being still for a minute, because we live these lives where we're at 90 miles per hour. We're a little bit scared to actually spend time with ourselves, to spend time with our thoughts. But if we know that Maharaj is within us, until we don't spend that time with ourselves, we won't be able to meet Maharaj. So just sitting comfortably, and just start to become aware of your breathing, become aware of your body. And if your mind starts coming up with lots of thoughts, that's okay, like that's normal. But if you just bring that mind back, bring it back to your breath. Maharaj Ji tells us, Tuk dam karari jo karoho hajar Hajur Khudaye, that when we focus on this one breath deeply, we can feel Vaheguru's presence, ever present. And now we're going to begin using the mantra, the Guru mantra, Vaheguru, bringing all of our attention onto the Shabad, onto the sound of the Shabad, singing the Shabad Gaviya, Suniya, listening with full attention, with full focus. And if we get distracted, that's okay, just bring your mind back. Man ki tabao, so having love in our heart and mind, that full bharosa in our mind as we begin. Vaheguru, 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 Vaheguru,
Waheguru, 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 Waheguru. Just allow yourself to sit in the stillness, noticing how you feel, and know that this is accessible to you at any time without the outside changing at all. Peace can be found inside. Please forgive any mistakes. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.